The Zorith had never been known for their compassion. Cold, calculating, and technologically superior, they swept across the galaxy, taking what they needed and leaving destruction in their wake. Their mission was simple: study, control, and conquer. Every species they encountered was merely a means to an end. And today, Earth was no different. Commander Xyler stood before the starboard window of the Zorith scout ship, gazing out at the blue and green marble below. Earth, a planet of primitive, soft creatures. Humans, they called themselves. The reports had been clear. They were weak, easily intimidated, and utterly vulnerable to the superior might of the Zorith. For decades, Earth had been observed, catalogued, and deemed unworthy of any real attention. Until now. Activate the containment beams, Xyler ordered, his voice cold and unwavering. His second-in-command, Officer Threx, nodded without hesitation, relaying the command to the ship's control center. Xyler watched the planet's surface, where a group of children played in a remote area. They were exactly what the Zorith had been seeking: vulnerable, easy to capture. Human children were rarely seen as anything more than pawns in the larger game, and these were no different. They would be captured, studied, and discarded. It was the way of things. The containment beams fired from the ship, invisible tendrils of energy locking onto the children. The Zorith had studied human children for years and knew they lacked the strength and cunning of their adult counterparts. The children would be easy prey. On the ground below, the children, no older than 12 or 13, were unaware of the danger approaching. Sarah, a bright-eyed girl with dark brown hair, kicked a ball to her friend, Jacob. He caught it with a laugh, tossing it back, oblivious to the strange hum in the air above them. The others, too, were playing and laughing, lost in their own world. Then, a sudden shift. The air seemed to warp around them. The children paused, sensing something was wrong. But before they could react, the world turned upside down. A bright light enveloped them, and they were lifted off the ground with startling force. Screams of panic filled the air as the children tried to break free, but it was no use. The containment beams were unrelenting, their grip tightening. They were pulled into the sky, rising swiftly into the waiting ship above. Inside the ship, the children were disoriented, their senses overwhelmed by the sudden change in environment. They found themselves in a sterile, cold room. The walls shimmered with the faint glow of alien technology, and strange mechanical sounds filled the air. The floor beneath their feet was hard and metallic, and the hum of energy vibrated through their bodies. Sarah was the first to recover. She stood shakily, looking around at the others. Jacob clung to her, wide-eyed with fear. The other children were equally confused and terrified, huddling together, looking for an explanation. "What's happening?" Jacob asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know," Sarah whispered, her heart racing. "But we're not on Earth anymore." A door on the far side of the room slid open with a hiss, and a group of tall, alien beings entered. Their skin was smooth and silvery, their eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. Their presence was imposing, their movements fluid and mechanical. They were like nothing the children had ever seen. One of the aliens stepped forward, its voice deep and monotone. "You will comply. No resistance will be tolerated." Sarah's pulse quickened. She had seen creatures like this in the science fiction books she read, but never in her wildest dreams had she imagined they were real. Panic surged through her chest, but she fought to keep it under control. These aliens might be strong, but she had learned from her older brother that fear only made things worse. "We won't go anywhere with you," Sarah said, her voice shaking but firm. The alien officer raised a brow, its expression unreadable. "You will be brought to the examination chambers. Resistance is futile." The other children looked at Sarah, some of them shrinking back in fear, others clutching their friends for support. But Sarah stood tall, trying to show them that they didn't have to be afraid, that they could survive this. The aliens stepped closer, but before they could grab any of the children, a sound echoed from the corridor outside. It was an alert, a signal that something was wrong. The lead alien officer, a creature called Vrail, paused, His glowing eyes flickered with something akin to confusion. For a moment, the ship fell into an eerie silence. The children, too frightened to speak, exchanged nervous glances. Vrail turned toward the door, his posture stiffening. "What is it?" he demanded through his communicator. A voice crackled in response. "Commander Zyler requests immediate extraction. There are unforeseen complications." Vrail's face hardened. The children had been captured as ordered, but something was amiss. He felt it in the air, a strange tension. His instincts, though rarely trusted by his superiors, warned him that this mission might not be as simple as it seemed. Zyler's orders were clear: take the children to the research facility. But Vrail's eyes lingered on the small group of humans before him. They were scared, yes, but there was something else in their gaze. Something fierce. Could it be possible? Before he could question further, the children were ushered out of the room, led down a narrow corridor by the alien soldiers. But in that fleeting moment of doubt, Vrail's thoughts began to shift. These children, these humans, were not what they appeared to be. This chapter sets the stage for the alien abduction, introducing the Zorith, their cold approach to humanity, and hints at the first moments of tension within the ranks of their own officers, particularly Lieutenant Vrail. The children, although terrified, show the first glimpses of their resilience and unity, setting up the conflict that will unfold. The Zorith research station hummed with sterile efficiency, its cold walls lined with alien technology. The children were confined to a high-tech holding area, the walls glowing faintly with a dull blue light. Their minds swam in confusion and fear. None of them knew what awaited them here, but it was clear it wasn't good. Sarah paced the small cell, her eyes scanning the walls for any clue, any weak spot. She could hear the others whispering behind her, the quiet rustling of clothes as they tried to stay close for comfort. Jacob, still trembling, huddled against the corner with his arms wrapped tightly around his knees. "Don't worry," Sarah said quietly, crouching down beside him. "We're not staying here." Jacob's eyes were wide with fear. "But where do we go? We're trapped. How do we even fight these things?" Sarah didn't have an answer. She wasn't sure how to fight, but one thing was certain. She wasn't going to let them take her, or her friends, without a fight. The Zorith had made a mistake capturing them. Humans were weak, sure, but they had something the Zorith hadn't accounted for: an unyielding will to survive. "Hey," Sarah said, her voice firm. "Do you remember what we talked about back home? About how we have to stick together. We can get out of here. But how?" Jacob's voice cracked, the words barely a whisper. Sarah stood up, pacing again, her mind racing. There had to be a way. The Zorith were advanced, yes, but they were not invincible. They relied on technology, and technology could be hacked, sabotaged. She had to think. Her brother had always said, "The only way to outsmart your enemy is to think like them." She eyed the small panel on the wall across from her. It was one of those alien devices, probably a security checkpoint or a surveillance feed. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. "Listen," she said, turning back to the group, her tone more urgent now. "We need to act fast. I think I can get us out of here, but I need your help. We need to make sure they don't see us coming." The others looked at her, fear still clouding their expressions, but there was a flicker of hope in their eyes. Sarah wasn't just any kid. She had always been the problem solver, and now it seemed her time had come. "I need someone to help me figure out what these buttons do." She pointed to a strange set of glowing panels on the far wall. "If we can get access to their systems, maybe we can get out of this cell." The other children hesitated, glancing at each other. Then, Tommy, a lanky boy with messy blonde hair, stepped forward. "I'll help," he said, his voice shaky but determined. "I might not be great with technology, but I can try." Sarah nodded, grateful. "Good. Stay low, and let's figure this out before they come back." As Tommy approached the panels, Sarah's heart raced. She had no idea what those buttons did, but she knew they had to take a risk. The Zorith would never expect them to fight back, let alone try to sabotage their systems. In her mind, Sarah could already see their escape, disabling the security, slipping past the guards and running to freedom. It wasn't just a dream. It was their only option. Tommy worked quickly, his hands trembling as he pressed buttons and fiddled with the alien device. The others watched in tense silence, waiting for something to happen. It was impossible to know whether this would work, but Sarah kept her focus. Minutes passed, and then, finally, a soft beep echoed through the room. Tommy looked up at Sarah, eyes wide. I think I did something." Before she could respond, a low hum vibrated through the walls. The lights in the cell flickered briefly, and then nothing. For a moment, it was as though the station had frozen in time. Then, a voice crackled over the intercom. "Intruder detected. Security lockdown initiated." The panel on the wall flashed red. "Time's up," Sarah muttered under her breath. The children quickly gathered together, their minds racing as the sound of alien footsteps approached. The Zorith were coming. But Sarah's heart surged with hope. They had made the first move. And this time it was the Zorith who were unprepared. In this chapter, the children begin to show their resilience and ingenuity. Sarah steps up as their leader, encouraging them to fight back against their captors, while Tommy begins to manipulate the alien technology. The tension rises as their first attempt to break free is met with a mixed result, but it's enough to set the stage for their escape. The chapter also introduces the growing sense that the Zorith have underestimated their captives, creating a powerful theme of human resistance. The air in the Zorith research station grew heavier as the children scrambled for cover. The security lockdown had been activated, and the walls seemed to pulse with an ominous red light. The intercom crackled again, this time a sharp, robotic voice declaring, "Security breach detected. All units report to containment level." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. "They know we're awake." She glanced at the others, Jacob, Tommy, and the rest, who were huddled in a corner of the cell, panic etched on their faces. They were no longer simply victims of an alien abduction. They were on the run. "We need to move now," Sarah whispered urgently. She motioned for them to follow her as she crept to the door of their cell, keeping low to avoid detection. Her earlier plan had failed, but they had one advantage: confusion. The Zorith hadn't expected this, and the lockdown gave them a brief window of opportunity. The children crept into the corridor, their footsteps barely audible against the cold metal floors. They had no idea where they were going, but Sarah led them with determination. As they moved cautiously, they heard the sound of alien voices growing louder in the distance, signaling the approach of Zorith guards. "We need to find a way to hide," Sarah hissed. "Quick, down this hallway." But just as they were about to duck into an alcove, the lights flickered, and a figure appeared at the end of the corridor. A Zorith soldier. The children froze, their breaths shallow, praying they wouldn't be spotted. The soldier's tall, imposing figure glided past them, its multi-lensed eyes scanning the area with mechanical precision. As the Zorith soldier passed, the children exhaled in relief. But Sarah knew they didn't have much time. The Zorith were too organized, too methodical. Their presence in the facility was getting more and more exposed. If they didn't act soon, they'd be caught. "Over here," Sarah whispered, guiding them into a side passage. This part of the station was quiet, almost abandoned. The walls were lined with strange alien symbols, but Sarah didn't waste time trying to understand them. They needed to find an escape route, and fast. Just as they turned a corner, a voice from behind startled them. "You shouldn't be here." Sarah whipped around, her heart racing, but it wasn't a Zorith soldier who stood before them. It was one of the aliens, the young officer who had been present when they were first brought aboard the ship. His face was hidden beneath the glowing visor of his helmet, but his voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Get away from us," Jacob cried, his voice trembling. The alien officer raised his hands, a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to harm you. I'm trying to help." Sarah stared at him, disbelief written on her face. "What are you talking about? You're one of them." "I am," the officer admitted, his voice lowering. "But things aren't what they seem." The children looked at each other, unsure whether to trust him. But there was something different about this alien. He wasn't like the others. His demeanor was uneasy, almost as if he didn't fully belong to the Zorith. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, her voice steady but tinged with suspicion. The officer sighed. "My name is Vrail. I'm a lieutenant here, but I don't agree with what the Zorith are doing. You should never have been captured. I've been watching you, all of you, and I've seen the way you fight back. You're stronger than they think." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "You're saying you want to help us?" Vrail nodded. "Yes, I can't let them do this to you. I've been ordered to oversee your confinement. But I can't stand by while they experiment on children." Sarah's mind raced. It didn't make sense. Why would an alien officer betray his own kind? Especially when it was clear how cold and ruthless the Zorith were. "Why should we trust you?" Tommy asked, stepping forward. "You're one of them." "I'm not like them," Vrail said softly. "I've seen enough to know that what they're doing to you is wrong. I can help you escape. But we need to hurry." The tension in the air was thick as the children exchanged wary glances. Trusting an alien felt like a death sentence. But there was something in Vrail's eyes that made Sarah pause. He wasn't like the others. His words, his actions, all seemed out of place for a Zorith soldier. "I can get you to the escape pods," Vrail said, his voice low but urgent. "But we have to move now before they realize what I've done." Sarah took a deep breath. She had no choice. They needed a way out, and Vrail was their best chance. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "We'll follow you. But no tricks." Vrail nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile appearing beneath his visor. "No tricks." As the children followed him down the shadowed corridor, Sarah's mind whirled. The Zorith were about to learn something they hadn't counted on. Humans were more than just fragile, easily controlled beings. They were survivors, and now they had an ally in the unlikeliest of places. In this chapter, the children, led by Sarah, take a risky step toward escaping the Zorith research station. Their situation grows more perilous as they encounter Vrail, a Zorith officer who reveals his disillusionment with his people and offers to help them escape. This chapter introduces the theme of unlikely alliances and sets the stage for the children's potential escape, adding complexity to the conflict as Vrail's motivations come into question. The corridor ahead was silent. The faint hum of the station's machinery the only sound as Sarah and the other children followed Vrail through the shadows. The Zorith officer led them with swift, practiced movements, his eyes constantly scanning for any sign of danger. Sarah's mind raced. She didn't trust him fully, how could she? But right now he was their best chance at escaping. And he was right about one thing. If they didn't act fast, they would be captured or worse. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked in a low whisper, trying to keep her voice steady. "To the escape pods," Vrail replied, his voice quiet but urgent. "The Zorith aren't expecting anyone to try to leave. But there's only a small window before they realize something's wrong." "Do you have a plan?" Tommy asked, glancing at the alien officer with suspicion. "Or are we just running blindly?" Vrail's eyes softened beneath his visor. "I have a plan, but I'll need your help. I can get you to the pods, but you'll have to act quickly once we get there." Sarah nodded. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "We'll do whatever it takes." As they moved deeper into the station, Sarah felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. She had never been in a situation like this before, where the stakes were so high and the risks so great. But she could see it in the eyes of the other children. They weren't giving up. Not now. They reached a junction, where two corridors met in the middle of the station. The lights here were dimmer, the shadows deeper. Vrail signaled for them to stop, holding up a hand. "This is where it gets tricky," Vrail murmured. "We'll need to split up for a short time to avoid the security patrols. I'll lead you through the main access tunnels. But there's a secondary route I'll need you to take." "Split up?" Jacob asked, his voice trembling. "Is that a good idea?" "It's the only way to avoid detection," Vrail said. "I'll be watching from a distance. If anything goes wrong, I'll be there to help. Just stay low and move fast." The children exchanged anxious looks, but Sarah's voice cut through the tension. "We don't have a choice. We'll do it." Vrail nodded, clearly relieved by her decision. "Good. The secondary route will lead to a maintenance shaft that should take you directly to the pod bay. Once there, disable the security systems as best as you can. I'll meet you there. Sarah looked at her friends, her heart heavy with the weight of the plan. Splitting up felt dangerous, but there was no other option. If they stuck together, they'd be too easy to track. One mistake could cost them everything. Stay in contact, Sarah said firmly. We'll do this together. The group nodded, and with one final look, Vrail motioned for Sarah and the others to take the secondary route. As they moved down the dimly lit tunnel, Sarah's pulse quickened. She could hear the distant sound of Zorith footsteps echoing in the halls, and her mind raced through the plan. The escape pods were their only way out of here. If they didn't make it, they'd be trapped forever. The further they went, the more the tension in the air grew. They had to stay out of sight, avoid detection at all costs. The Zorith weren't known for their mercy. They reached a series of maintenance doors, each one lined with strange alien symbols. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she realized the exit was just beyond. They were close, so close. But before she could reach for the door, a sound behind them, louder now, made her freeze. Footsteps. Zorith soldiers. Move, Sarah hissed. She shoved the maintenance door open, and they slipped inside just as the soldiers rounded the corner. The children pressed themselves against the walls of the narrow shaft, their breaths shallow and fast. Sarah held her breath, waiting for the Zorith to pass. She knew it was only a matter of time before they realized something was wrong. But they couldn't turn back now. I don't know how much longer we can keep this up, Tommy whispered, his voice tight with fear. We'll make it, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the rising panic in her chest. We have to. Ahead, the faint glow of the pod bay doors flickered in the distance. They were almost there. The children crept forward, their every step deliberate and quiet. This was the final stretch. If they made it past the last set of guards, they could reach the pods and finally escape. But even as they neared the end of the maintenance tunnel, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Something was off, and they were running out of time. In this chapter, Sarah and the others prepare for their escape as they follow Vrail's plan to reach the escape pods. Tensions rise as they split up to avoid Zorith detection, facing the dangers of the alien station's security system. The children's resolve is tested as they make their way toward freedom, but an ominous sense of being watched foreshadows more danger ahead. The chapter builds the suspense and sets up the high-stakes finale.